Plotting day. With bellies and brains suitably fueled, the fox and rook entered into serious strategic discussions deep in Mischief Manor, which, given the lack of roof, was actually more or less under open sky. First things first, the pair set to work building a model of the railway track and meadow upon a bare patch of the manor floor, so they might better visualize their ideas. Rock utilized the main tool cache of Mischief Manor, located behind the great stone throne. There he seemed to flip open one of the mossy stone tiles, as though it was merely the lid of a tin box. And that's exactly what it was. The original stone tile had been removed and almost seamlessly replaced with a large tin box of similar dimension, veneered in moss for camouflage. It was here that Rock, as chief engineer of the team, stored all the potentially useful items found out on patrols. Within were metal knickknacks, nuts and bolts, wire, twine, strings of gut from harps and fiddles, coins, cutlery items, bullets, brushes, padlocks, keys, monocles, and more. This was not the only concealed cache of clothback artifacts in Mischief Manor, though. There was in fact another tin box filled with confiscated loot, the jewelry and precious possessions of people, some of who will spend years looking about their own home never to find the items again. A few would actually pass these very cottage ruins on a country stroll, completely unaware their prized possession was only footsteps away. And where was this second tin box hidden? In a place no snooping clothbacks will ever know, that's for sure. But back at the tool cache, the rook flung out a box of matches, the same brand once used in the failed Gosgard arson. Next emerged the trusty hook and line, adapted to break a pie from prison. A keen eye might spot the cutthroat razor famously wielded in a certain sausage raid being retrieved also. Rock fossicked for some wire pieces and with his beak making excellent pliers, bent them into rail segments, laying them into a nice little railway. Some assorted carved animal figurines and bolts for fill-ins were placed for the cows of Dolefield Meadow. Rutsnut collected some pine cones to represent the skirting trees and twigs for the fence. And when the scene was set, the little train was placed between the rails, and Rock hooked the fishing line around the funnel. But there were two final touches. Rock dragged out a spare candle from under the throne, holding the razor so Rutsnut could stomp and clip the tip off. Then with some clay from the den, the rook fixed this sideways on the engine front for the little headlamp. Green twigs were stuffed in the funnel. Finally, the crowbird struck a match, lit the headlamp and burned the twigs until the train smoked like a real engine. As Rutsnut pulled the train along by the fishing line, the smoke even trailed. And analyzing their model, both sets of eyes locked intensely, the pair put their methodical minds to work. The most striking feature is obviously the beaming eye of the engine, said Rock. Our analysis should probably start there. Agreed, said Rutsnut. It appears to be the most unique feature, and the entrancing aspect is hard to make sense of. Why would men invent such a device? Why would they want beasts rushing onto the track and risk damaging their precious machine? Maybe it was designed to freeze such moo beasts near the track to stop them getting upon it, but has somehow malfunctioned? Maybe, said Rock. Or maybe it's some cruel weapon of their future war machines being experimented with on unsuspecting beasts. But it's possible we'll never understand the clothback motivations behind it all, so deranged are their minds. Our task is only to stop the train's assaults, and blinding the head of this steel snake might just do that. We should probably blind our own engine for now too, said Rutsnut, so we have enough lamp left for night simulations. And Rock reached over and snuffed the headlamp wick with a clapping beak. If only it was that simple with the real one, said Rutsnut, a lot further out of reach and racing faster than any beast. I have no idea how we'd shut it off. I have one, said Rock. We've determined the eye can't freeze me. So imagine I were to fly head-on at the train, holding an iron spanner in my claws, even a large bolt. I released the missile, aiming at the lamp. The combined speed of my flight and the train could make for an incredible impact. I'm sure I could obliterate it. The fox tried to envisage this. I believe you could obliterate it in such spectacular fashion, said Rutsnut, but I'm more sure you could obliterate yourself in the attempt. This plan involves extreme aeronautical precision, and yes, your daylight aerobatics can be spectacular indeed. If it was a midday strike, I would be more confident you would manage it. But it isn't, and flight skills aside, we must be honest about your vision, my moon-roosting friend. You are not naturally a creature of the starlight hours, surely no lamp-eyed owl. You even prefer to piggyback when we trek after dark. I would fear for your life if you had to judge a head-on charging train upon the wing during night hours. Then we add a blinding light confusing you even more. One flap too far, and you might easily end up nesting in that headlamp dish for eternity, or roosting on the funnel forever after. One wrong tail twist, and the only way you'll blind the train will be your feathery hide splattering the cabin window pane. And that still won't be enough to stop its charge. I must admit my starlight flight is not the strongest, said Rock, and splattered on glass would be a rather humiliating way to leave this world, like the fate of a numbskulled bird attacking its own reflection. Then scraped off and tossed into the train's furnace, added Rutsnut. perhaps even taken out when crispy and served to the passengers. The meat would definitely be tender. Don't get any ideas, said Rock. Remember, you're the one who lives in a fireplace, and I'm the one who can strike a flame. It's been years since I thought of eating you, said Rutsnut. Let's leave aside blinding the machine then, said Rock, and my untimely death, and discuss the anatomy of this train with some proper logic to find another angle of attack. As we know, many a furbeast believes that the train is an iron animal. They have no understanding of its inner workings whatsoever. Well, said Rutsnut, it's not just the furbeasts who believe that. There are many feather beasts also, and I think with the advantage of their bird's eye view, seeing trains from every possible angle, they should know much better. Birds may have a more complete view in general, said Rock, but the furbeasts are known to be taken as passengers on the train itself, within freight cars, and even the furnished carriages if they are dogs or cats. They should know better. The farm fowls have carriages all to themselves, said Rutsnut. I've tried to board more than a few myself. Oh, don't count those as real birds, said Rock. They can barely ascend a gatepost. You yourself might even outfly some. I think you actually did back at Gosgard. But with a winter coat on your limbs and a suitable bridge leap, you'd certainly be competitive. Are you trying to trick me into plummeting into a river, my friend? Said Rutsnut. In the middle of winter? If I wanted to do that, said Rock, I'd just toss a toy duck in and wait for your splash. Anyway, he continued, now dragging the wooden locomotive along by the line, we both know, my candid companion, that it is not the train itself that controls the motions of the machine, but the crew within the cabin. By my observation, there are two men within, one who feeds the fiery engine and one who drives the machine like a farmer drives a tractor. Yes, said Rutsnut, that's the secret of the train all clever critters know well, and we can therefore speculate that if the train itself is behaving in destructive ways, it must ultimately be the crew controlling such destruction, most especially the driver. And we know that men are capable of great destruction, said Rock, and great evil to fuel it. No fox would disagree, said Rutsnut, and it would make perfect sense that evil men could turn a normal train into a weapon for their cause, somehow or another. But we also know, said Rock, that just as with any snake, if the head of the steel snake is removed, the engine itself, the body is then harmless. I would say that in the case of the train, said Rutsnut, the body would not be quite so harmless as a snake's, as even headless it could destroy any creature in its path while still moving, and if it writhed off the railway, could well level an entire village. So we'll need to be far more careful than when hunting the standard serpent. And taking the line in his jaws, the fox yanked the train so hard that it tipped over and violently scuttled some pine cones. Quite true, said Rock. And if it does level an entire village, we must be first on the scene to secure the spoils. But I assume, said Rutsnut, that we're not attempting to remove the whole head of this great steel snake, only cripple it somehow. And the fox righted the train between the rails once more. Ideally, we would crush the whole head just in case, said Rock, but it definitely seems a hefty task. I believe pecking out the brain is the necessary solution. And what if the brain is replaced? Said Rutsnut. Unlike a fleshly snake, trains have this done all the time. Then it can be removed again and again, said Rock. At the very least, a message will be sent, and men may think twice. In the end, we can only do what we can. Damaged machines can be repaired. Missing men can be replaced. It is the way of the clothback world. But any sabotage will be for the good, and in the worst case, provide relief to the moo beasts for a time. True, said Rutsnut. Practically speaking, though, it's a very large brain to peck out, a brain the size of two men, since even if the driver is acting alone, his fireman will help in a struggle. A brain with 4 arms and legs, said Rock, and at least one shovel to strike with, a very troublesome brain for sure. It's also a very difficult brain to get to, said Rutsnut, protected even more than the beaming eye, in this speeding, steel-skinned skull. To attack the head of this train, said Rock, I'd say we would likely need the machine motionless to get into proximity, and so we must either encounter the train in such a state or force the train to stop. Let's consider the first option. Perhaps, said Rutsnut, we could board when it loiters at a station, bide our time within and strike when the train is en route and the crew distracted. A well-timed ambush in the cabin, you striking the face, me the legs, might topple at least the driver to his doom, particularly if we executed this over a bridge crossing. The rook rushed to the toolbox, collected items, and constructed a station using a lozenge box with the lid propped up with nails. Then the fox moved the smoking train up to park beside it. It should be possible, said Rock, to hide on the far side of the track and hop upon the platform between the coal cart and first carriage as the train departs, avoiding discovery. At the moment of attack, we will have to cross the coal cart and burst into the cabin from the rear. The fox narrowed his eyes now. Yet this is probably the worst angle of attack, he said. We'll have to advance into the oncoming smoke column and could be half blinded with soot by the time we make it. But worst of all, the fireman takes the fresh coal from this rear opening, and we could easily be met at the cabin entrance with a shovel-wielding strongman guarding the engine. I could fly in through the side, said Rock. And if I try that, said Rutsnut, I'm flying into the woods. Actually, the more I consider this, the more have my doubts we can topple the crew by ourselves, even if we can breach the cabin. It would take the most perfectly timed surprise attack, and anything less would end in very dangerous failure. If we didn't succeed in the first moments, they would get the upper hand. We're not meadow giants with horns beyond any known fangs, who can trample and gore unsuspecting clothbacks with ease when in the mood. Then it's clear we'll have to resort to the second option, said Rock, and bring the train to a stop ourselves between stations. This seems much harder than finding the train already stopped. But if it can be done, the crew would be far more vulnerable to a full-scale ambush, wouldn't they? Surely, said Rutsnut. But how then do we halt this metallic monster? Even the heftiest beasts of the land can't slow it, but are simply flung aside like ants from a paw. We must try to ignore the overwhelming size and weight of this cow-crushing colossus, said Rock. Conceptually speaking, it's simply a contraption of men, isn't it? In essence, not so different from the one before us. With our mischievous craft, I still believe halting it is possible. There is a way. And so the pair spent much time musing on this difficulty, pacing or flying around the craggy lair, running options through their trickster minds, at times inspecting the model train and meadow. And what a challenge this was, to stop dead in its track, a full-scale, smoke-churning, ever-charging locomotive. Rutsnut took up position just inside the fireplace entrance of his den, where he often did his best thinking, and Rock perched atop the chimney, where he often did his. Throughout the day they continued to plot, and now and then the seed of a solution would come to one or the other. What if I could tunnel under the track and destabilize it? Offered Rutsnut at such a moment, rushing out to the model, finding a dirt seam between stones under the track and carving away with a claw. It's just simple earth under the strut gravel. I've spent my life digging through the stuff, and the width of the track is short. I dug longer shafts as a kid, helping my mother extend the den. If the track failed and the train was derailed, it might well crash and destroy itself, and its evil controllers, in a cascade of mangled metal. What a promising idea this seemed. But as they thought more upon it, problems soon appeared as usual. It might be possible for you to undermine this track, said Rock, peering down at the model from the chimney rim. But I think we're forgetting an important detail. This train is not the only machine using those rails. Other trains pass, and we might just crash one of those beforehand, shutting down the line for repairs. Also, if the track were to wobble with a passing train while you dug away, a railway crew would rush out to fix the problem. And if they found you in that tunnel, my man-hunted friend, sabotaging their precious track, it would become your grave den. So back to hard plotting it was. Then the Rook offered another option. How about simply lighting the cabin up in flames, said Rock. Maybe all I'd have to do is fly across the train's path and smash in a big fuel-filled lantern. It's a much safer flight than a head-on attack, as long as I keep enough altitude to clear the engine. And the bird dove down, took some basin water in his beak, then flew across the track and slashed the liquid across the toy train's cabin in simulation. Another promising idea, no question, but those pesky problems still refuse to leave them be. It's a beautiful vision once more, said Rutsnut, but I wonder how much fuel you could really carry and still achieve that altitude, or maintain flight agility. With a lantern big enough to paint that cabin well with fire, I doubt it can be done. You'd be like a hawk trying to drag home a farm-fattened swine. Rock realized he was right. But listen, said Rutsnut, maybe we're overcomplicating things now. What if we just considered what would naturally cause a train to stop? Perhaps this will take us somewhere. We know stations bring trains to a halt, though we have ruled them out in damaged tracks, though we ruled those out too. A fallen tree would be nice, but they don't fell themselves. Snow would work if it wasn't the wrong season, and it would probably have to be the worst winter yet. Got anything else? They stop if the engines run out of coal, said Rock, but they seem always well stocked. Mechanical failure also, but our automotive engineering is far too lacking to sabotage those churning gears and pistons. If it wasn't, we could probably just fix up a herd of old tractors and park them on the track, keeping a few for our own raids even. But alas, our Mischief does have its limitations, and so do our fingerless forelimbs. The pair now fell silent, and Rock returned to the chimney top. And so it was quiet for some time in Mischief Manor, with just the sound of wind and skipping leaves, and the chin scratching of Rutsnut and the chinking of Rock's claws as he paced around the chimney rim, swiping his beak once a circuit. Then the Rook leaped to the skies with a flurry of feather, resting his pacing legs for a while, and circled above on the wing. An excellent way to get a new angle on any problem, though much harder for flightless critters to achieve. They'll need to climb a mountain, or at least a hefty hill to get similar effect. And so Rock cruised with slow-beating wings. And while he was up there, something caught his eye beyond the wood. It was a worldly detail that would normally not give anyone pause for thought, but today it proved meaningful. What he spotted was a path where 4 children were playing. And when a man on a bicycle approached and whistled to clear them off, they were too slow to react and he was forced to swerve, skidding wildly and almost crashing. Rock dived back down, threaded through the chimney chute and landed right by the fireplace den opening. "I have it," he said. "I know what can stop a train anywhere on its track." "And what would that be?" said Rudsnut. The crowbird darted to the toolbox, scraped around and drew out a tiny pegdoll, then placed it right before the train. "A child upon that very track," said Rock. Rudsnut bolted out, nearly bowling his partner over. "You just might have it," he said. "The train will surely plow through animals, but the cloth-backed child is the most protected creature of all." The fox then scowled. "But how, my fine-witted fellow, do we actually stick a child on the track? They might be smaller than adults, but they're still far larger than us. And at night they are no longer playing outside, but tucked safely in bed, locked in behind the walls and windows of their stony dens. And sometimes there are even great hounds protecting them, as though these children are their own pups. Some children are also located in a place with no walls or windows during the nights," said Rock, "and are too frail to resist." "And where would that be?" said Rudsnut. "In the graveyards," said Rock. "Are you suggesting we dig up dead children to drag onto the track?" said Rudsnut. "You are surely an expert digger," said Rock. "And like all corvid kind, I know my way around a graveyard." "This is a truly macabre idea," said Rudsnut. "It is indeed," said Rock. "But I am a crowbird, after all." "Some might even consider it truly disturbing," said Rudsnut. "I don't deny graves would be disturbed," said Rock. "Then I fear there is a real problem with this plan," said Rudsnut. "It is too grisly for you," said Rock. "Someone who has been burying carcasses in shallow graves for years?" "No," said Rudsnut. "The problem is the coffin. I can definitely dig us down to it, but we'll never open the box lid. They nail them tight. Even your strong beak would fail to loosen the lid a feather width. You'd likely just snap off the tip." Rock let out a wailing, frustrated squawk, as piercing as a gull's. "But," said Rudsnut, "let's not give up on this idea just yet. Remember, as long as the train thinks a child is stuck on the track, it will stop. What if we could find a suitable imitation? On these farms the little goats are called kids, and the reason, I believe, is that they resemble farmers' kids in size. All we have to do is get hold of one, and disguise it as a real child sitting on the track. In the darkness of night, surely the driver will know no difference and will be forced to halt the train's charge. Do you foresee any problems with this?" The rook thought a moment, searching his big little brain. "No obvious problems we can't overcome," said Rock. "Then do we have the solution to this, the most difficult stage?" said Rudsnut. "I believe we do," said Rock. "Once we've stopped the machine, the rest should be straightforward," said Rudsnut. And both moved the carved animal figurines and symbolic bolts over to surround the engine cabin. "We will help the meadow giants get their horns upon the driver," said Rock, "or perhaps drive them straight through. He will be at their mercy and they can punish him however they see fit, and the fireman too if he takes up arms. It's our task only to deliver the brain of this railway renegade to the Dolefield herd."